meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Welcome back to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie McCabe, and we are sharing the stories of the foster care community and offering practical help and hope for your foster parenting journey. That's what we do on this podcast every time we meet. And today we are going to discuss a very, really, I would say one of the more confusing aspects of foster care, the foster care journey, and that is the court process. I am so happy to welcome Cari Huddleston with us. She has been a guardian at Litem in Houston County, Georgia's juvenile court system for 15 years. She and her husband, Jason, have 3 children, all who are avid softball and baseball players. Cari, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So happy to have you and really to dive into this very confusing process of court. I want you to first introduce our guests to what maybe they've never heard of Guardian ad litem, and maybe many of them are very, very well acquainted with this. But what is the responsibility of the GAL and specifically in the Child's Foster Case Plan?
In our state, Georgia, the legislature has mandated that every case, the first attorney that is appointed is actually for the children. So that it's a 2-prong situation. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney since, a long time. But we are mandated to be actually the attorneys for the children. And so the guardian ad litem and the attorney share that role in a way. But as the guardian ad litem, we are responsible for making sure that what we feel is in the best interest of the children is what is presented to the court when we get to that point.
Okay.
So it's kind of confusing because how we have it in our court system, we don't have any like specific office of the guardian ad litem. In bigger courts, like in the Atlanta area, they do have an entire office of guardian ad litems. And so we have 3 attorneys that work in our courts. And so we are shuffled around between being an attorney for the parents or being an attorney for the children. So that's how our system works where we are. But essentially, the first attorney that's appointed is the guardian ad litem for the child. Before a parent gets an attorney, the legislature felt like it was the most important thing to make sure that the kids have a voice. And so that's what I do.
Wow. How did you get into this work? Was this something you thought you might want to do from when you were young?
I had no idea. I had no idea that this was even a thing, that it existed. And I got married. And when we first got married, I was a staff attorney for the Superior Court, had a good friend who mentored me. And when I got pregnant with my first child, I knew that I wanted to be home with that baby for as long as possible. And so I talked to my attorney mentor friend, and he said, well, let me show you what we do here. He brought me to juvenile court, and I didn't find it. Juvenile court found me, and I've been there ever since. And, it took me a really, 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 really long time to figure out that it wasn't what I necessarily envisioned for myself. I never thought that I would, not really be making a whole lot of money as an attorney. You think, oh, I'm going to go, make all this money and be living in luxury and all that. But God put me exactly where I am. And it took me a really long time to accept that and know that regardless of how much money I make or how much prestige I have or anything else, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be and I'm there for a purpose. And so, like I said, it took me probably 14 and a half years to figure that out. But I'm very thankful that, I was led to juvenile court because I know that I've made an impression on kids throughout the community. And it's where I'm supposed to be. So
Thank you for sharing that. And that's a good place to be when you understand, like, this is where I am. Maybe it's not where I expected or even wanted to be, but this is where God has called me. And when you're settled in that purpose, that's a great feeling just to know it and to accept what God's plan is. Now, I know that there's no typical foster care case, right? Every case is different. And yet, I'm curious, is there a sort of typical court process? Like, if someone's like, what does it look like from start to finish for a foster care case to go through court? What would you say?
so for us, again, it's very state specific. But we have a lot of court hearings quickly. We don't want any child to be kind of lost in the weeds. And so
Mm,
we'll have the first hearing when the children are initially removed from their parents, from their biological parents or guardians, whoever it may be. They'll have that emergency type hearing. And then within the next 2 weeks, have to have another hearing. That gives the Department of Family and Children Services time to investigate to see if the allegations are actually valid, substantiated. But then they also have to present that to the court to make sure that everybody is protected, gives guardian ad litems a chance to see, okay, what really is going on? I need to meet with the kids so that I can talk to them. And then from there, we have review hearings that are set based on the ages of the kids. When they're younger, we want to have more hearings, so they're closer in time frame as far as like a couple months, as opposed to waiting 6 months or a year before you have any kind of review to see, okay, well, how are these kids actually doing? What are the parents actually doing? And so, it kind of takes two prongs at that point. After your initial review, which I'd say about 6 months down the road, you're either have a situation where the parents are making progress and doing what they're supposed to do, or they're not. And so we either stick with reunification, or the court says, okay, we need to start working towards a permanency plan where these kids are going to have a stable life. And so there's kind of that two prong at that point.
mhm.
So, and we are our judge is very concerned about stability and permanency for our kids. And so she's going to make that determination really quickly. The law gives us 6 months to see where the parents are at. And so at that 6 month point, she'll let them know, I'm not going to fool around anymore. We're either going to, go in the way of reunification, or we're gonna move towards non-reunification and either adoption or guardianship, whichever is the best for the child at that point.
Yeah. Now, that there are many judges in court systems all over across the United States. You're talking specifically in your court system. What there's also states. So obviously, there's different judges care about. They have different propensities for different things. Like you said, this one specifically is very, very cares deeply about stability, so she moves quickly. That's not always the case, right? With other judges, are there state specific laws as well? Like in the 6 month thing, or are there some things that are kind of the same across the board across the United States? Are you aware?
I I don't know specifically, but I would imagine that some states are more lenient towards um, time frames as far as taking allowing the parents more time to get their lives in order. I don't know. I think I really don't know the legals in other states, but I think that there's differences. I know just from personal experience, I had a relative in another state that was a foster parent, and it was like 2 years down the road, and then all of a sudden the kids went back to their biological parents. And so I think that there's definitely bigger windows in other states.
Yeah, yeah. There's a wide spectrum. We're getting a perspective on court, specifically in Georgia, but this I think it's going to help for those who just aren't even aware about what it looks like. It gives that kind of just an eye into this. And then for those who are navigating court in their state, some of this may be encouraging, and some of it may also be like, oh man, I wish my judge
Mm,
was quicker in those
right.
areas,
Absolutely. Yeah,
for example.
absolutely.
Are there any major court milestones that foster parents should expect? You talked about a point when it gets to a two prong, but what are some of kind of those key milestones?
Well, I think, it's obviously a case by case basis with how a parent or a guardian, whoever had the child to begin with, however they're doing. Um, when there are issues about visitation, for example, that's a milestone. It's either going to be, if the parent is at a point where they can go back to having, an unsupervised visitation situation, I think, you know, that's something that a foster parent probably should be there for in court. Those are the milestones that, and then obviously reunification if that is the goal. But when the judge does decide not to do reunification, that's, kind of a major milestone as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
Um, and um, I don't know how other courts do notifications towards the foster parents as far as court hearings. I've been kind of trying to work on that in our court to make sure that foster parents are notified.
Mm.
Um, but it's very difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, because I know for us, when we were foster parents in Illinois, and with our specific agency in our community, they really encouraged us to go to court. And that was an opportunity to hear things that like a caseworker wouldn't be able to share otherwise, or things like that. But I know that's not even the case for a lot of people. And we also even had a foster parent, I forget what it was called, but essentially we had like a form that we could fill out that would go directly to the judge as well. And I know that's not always the case. That's why I think court is so confusing, is because it's just not always the case across the board. And yet court is always part of foster care. But the
Hmm.
way that plays out is different. Um, but when you think about who are the players in the room, when you're in a court hearing, um, who are usually there? Obviously, the GAL, you are there, the judge. Who else is in court that has to be there?
The parents, obviously, if they're not MIA, which oftentimes they are, in our court, the parents are entitled to an attorney, and that's sometimes it's appointed by the court based on finances, which usually if you've gotten to this point and your kids are in foster care, you probably don't have the resources to hire an attorney, but the court tries to appoint them if we can. And then the attorney for what we call DFACS, which is our Department of Family and Children's Services, they have their own attorney and caseworkers. So all the caseworkers from the department would be there specific to, that individual case as well. Usually there's supervisors from DFACS as well, just because they want to make sure that everything goes the proper way. um, and, like I said, foster parents I always encourage them to come. But there's so many court hearings. It's so difficult because they have to take off work, and oftentimes notice is not given in enough time for them to say, hey, I need off this day. So that's difficult. But those are the main people.
Mhm. Yeah, and actually, you mentioned you encourage foster parents to come, and I know, like I said, I was encouraged to come. But why do you encourage them? What should foster parents expect to see or hear? Will they be asked to speak? Like these are some concerns that they might have of like, what do I even do if I show up, and what will I hear?
Right. Like you said before, it's oftentimes very confusing in the court situation, but it's often ahead of time, it's confusing for them to kind of know what's going on. And so if they come, they can listen and maybe get some more understanding, some clarity on what's happening. Okay, so mom is actually doing X, Y, and Z. Or if they're worried about services for the foster kids, that's, something that they could get clarity on in court. And I think it's a hard line for me because I technically do not represent foster parents. I represent the kids
Mhm.
and their best
Sure.
interests. But if they can come to court and they hear what's going on, I might be able to explain it in court to them so that they don't leave confused. Again, it's a difficult line for people to understand that no, I can't give you any kind of legal advice. I'm not your attorney. Um, but I will say that it gives them the ability to show their face to the judge, and the judge knows who they are. And so then she can remember them, know what they're doing, but it also gives them the ability to speak if they want to. There's never any requirement to speak, but they're given the ability if they want to. And that's a great time for them to say, "Hey, I'm supposed to be getting, ABA services for my foster kid, and they haven't set it up yet. Can we work
Mhm.
on that?" They can, ask questions if they need to. They can report how visitations are going between the parents and the children, little things that they may have made note of throughout however long it's been since the last court hearing. Um, it's funny how sometimes what the foster parent is experiencing is not necessarily how it's reported by the department. And so it's oftentimes a good idea so
Huh.
that they can say, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't really agree with how that was said or how that was displayed before the court. Like we're having a lot more trouble than just what you said." So they're supposed to be a party, in essence, to the case where their voice can be heard. And hopefully reported accurately. And the best way to do that is for them to be present in court.
Hmm.
But again, it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's absolute logistics of getting there and taking off work, like you said. What does that look like when they are, let's say they are there, they do hear something that doesn't feel accurate to them, based on their experience? Do they literally raise their hand and speak up right then? Like, what's the process to be heard?
What our judge will do is ask at the end of the hearing if the foster parents have anything that they would like to share or anything that they need to add. She's very particular about when people speak and making sure that they speak at the proper time, just so that, we have a court reporter, we need it to be recorded. We don't want it to be confusing. And so usually it's at the end of the hearing she'll ask and say, "Hey, did y'all want to speak?" And that's obviously the right time.
How would you say, how does the court actually determine the best interest of the child? And additionally, like, how do you as a GAL gather the information needed to advocate for the best interest of the child?
From my standpoint. And obviously this is not standard practice for everybody, but I will I'll get a lot of information from the foster parent because I think that they're the best resource as far as what's really going on with the children. But I also will talk to the kids. So many times kids are like, "I just want to go home to my mom and dad." But that's not in their best interest at all. But just see, I try to gain information from all different aspects of the case, whether that be from, the department. We also have what's called a CASA involved in some of the cases, which is a court appointed special advocate. And they're a wealth of information too, just because I would love to be able to go and have a home visit with every single kid, but I probably have 100 plus cases, and so I just don't physically have the ability to do that. But Acasa has one case. And so they're an excellent resource for actually figuring out what's really going on in the home. Um, and I rely heavily on their opinion. But there's been lots of times when I do not agree. I do not agree with their opinion. As, odd as this would sound to a lot of people, I really pray about a lot of the cases I have that are tough.
Mhm.
Um, because I just, you know, I know I'm here for a reason, and I know that, God wants to use me to reach out to people that
Mhm.
are at their lowest point in life. And so I want to make sure that I'm using the wisdom that I've been given to figure out, okay, well, what's really in your best interest. And not all, there's times when I don't necessarily agree
Mhm.
um with what the department says is in the best for interest of these kids. Um and so there's sometimes when we have little disagreements, but
Mhm.
most of the time we're on the same page.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that feels like a healthy thing. I mean, the healthy disagreement can be helpful when you're all really trying to help a child, right?
Right, absolutely.
Hey friends, it's Jamie, just popping in here for a minute to say we love to hear from you. And it's really important to us that what we're bringing to you is actually helping you, is meeting felt needs. Would you give us a rating and review or contact us directly and just let us know how we are being helpful, but also are there ways we can be more helpful to you? We want to hear from you. We're encouraged by you and we're here for you. So thank you for taking a few moments to do that for us. And now let's head back to the episode.
When you think of foster parents, they really do have an impact or an opportunity to make an impact on court outcomes. What do you recommend for them in terms of documentation, communication with the judge or with you or with court officials?
Usually the judge is not going to hear any communications or have any letters or anything like that outside of court. Now, if they come to court, perfect opportunity. I love to have input from my foster parent personally. Those are the people that know. And so I always encourage them to send me an email, give me a call, send me a text message, however they want to communicate. But it's also, I think, really important that they kind of have a journal and write out what's going on day to day. Um, especially if, say, bio mom has a visit that day and the kids come back and they are just out of control. Okay, well, see if we can pinpoint, was it because of the visit, because of how she acted at the visit, or is it because they miss her and they want to go home? Like, let's try to pinpoint what the behavior issues are, or maybe you keep a dye-free home and mom brought Jolly Ranchers. Like, what
Sure.
can we figure it out, because honestly, the best outcomes that I've seen in court hearings are when foster parents work hand in hand with the biological parents and have kind of a co-parenting situation. And oftentimes it doesn't mean that the kids go back to the bio family, but when the kids see that the foster parents are supporting their parents in the same, they're kind of arm in arm, right? When it's an extended family, it's just been the best outcomes for everybody involved. And oftentimes it's the foster parents who are adopting the kids, but because they have shown such love and grace to the biological parents, the kids almost have that same set sort of peace among, within themselves, that everybody's working together to try and resolve the situation.
Wow.
Just for an example, we had a case here recently where it was a teen mom who had a baby and she did not have the resources to care for the baby. Love the baby, no question about it. But the foster parents, also have loved that baby. And she agreed that she was going to surrender her parental rights to them so that they could adopt the baby. And it's because that they worked all together. They never told her, we're taking your kid. They just sent her pictures, allowed her to visit when it was appropriate and worked together with her to support her. And she knows that that's always a resource for her if she ever needed, to call somebody and ask for advice. And it's just a great outcome, for everybody involved.
I love to hear that. I think that's super important to hear is those are the best outcomes is when the parents, foster parents and biological parents work hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. And, I can't imagine coming from a foster parent standpoint who's, loving on these kids, how difficult it would be to put themselves kind of on the back burner and, work arm in arm with the parents to support them for the hope of reunifying with their kids. I don't know how hard that would be, but it's an amazing outcome when everybody's together and working on that same page.
And I think about the biological parents as well, like how scary it is to have your kids out of your home and out of your care and to have a foster parent who is kind and compassionate and willing to walk with you. I mean, just that's beautiful.
It is. It is.
Well, we're going to start wrapping up here a little bit, but I want you to speak directly to the foster parents right now and maybe just a piece of advice or encouragement to help them navigate the court process with confidence and with compassion.
I think, like I was saying a second ago, keeping kind of a journal of how things are going in the home. But I think also, I've had the pleasure of speaking to foster parents at support dinners, and I think if foster parents can kind of look for that support in other ways and recognize that they also have feelings and they also have emotions, don't just keep it all inside because you know, it's hard. It's hard for me, and I don't have the kids in my own home.
Mhm.
And I think it's okay if you have to say no to stuff. It's okay to worry about your own self too, and not just constantly be trying to support the foster kids and the foster or the biological parents. It's okay to ask for respite if you need to.
Mm.
Don't get so burnt out. With, everybody else's needs that you forget your own. Because I know, we have some of the most amazing foster parents, in our area, and some have, 10 kids in their house. But I worry about them emotionally and
Mhm.
physically, because that's a lot of kids. I got 3, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine having 10.
Mhm.
Um, but, I think and not all foster parents are Christians or religious or anything like that, but if you can get plugged in, there are churches that will help. There's churches that will offer like a date night, and you can drop your kids off or your foster kids, all the kids off, and then go out with your husband, and or spouse, whatever. And have that rest.
When you think about your career in this, it's been 15 years, more than 15 years for you. You're hearing hard stories over and over and over. You're seeing the real lives of kids and families, and um, you're seeing brokenness up close. Like, how do you guard yourself from burnout? And how do you kind of keep that emotional, like a softness and yet like not to the point of like where you're broken yourself in the sense of like I can't keep going.
I have no idea. Um, I think I've been given a really good ability to compartmentalize. I try not to bring stuff home when but I I think about these kids at night. I worry. Um, and it's amazing how how God works because there's some kids that I worry about, but then I see them at my church,
Ugh,
and I'm like, "Oh, you're okay." You're like, I don't have to
wow.
worry. I'm pretty involved with our kids program and our youth at church. And so like at one of the girls in my I teach 10th grade Sunday school, and one of the girls in my Sunday school class, I know her story. And so it's like, oh, wait, she's okay. Um, I'll help out with like our VBS program over the summer. And it's amazing how many of those kids I know, and I never tell them why I know them, but it's just one of those reassuring things like, okay, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. But it's hard. I've had, cases where kids unfortunately have passed away and, just all sorts of stuff. And I don't think I would be able to do it or continue to do it if I didn't, you know, have a relationship with Jesus in myself, because I think I would be burnt out if I didn't have the peace of knowing I'm exactly where God wants me to be.
Mm.
I think I would have probably quit a long time ago. And don't get me wrong, there are times when I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. But then something happens and I'm like, man, God, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be there. I
Mm.
have my own little temper tantrum, and then I realize that it's okay. I'm supposed to do it. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing it. Thank you for staying in the work for so long and for the way you care for kids and families. And it's such an important role that you play. And appreciate you just kind of enlightening us a little bit more into like giving us a look into your world. And appreciate that. Carrie, last question. I just want to, I'm thinking of foster parents who are really struggling through this court process right now. They're just discouraged. They're just overwhelmed. They're frustrated. Any encouragement you have to them as we close out?
the job of being a foster parent is so difficult, but the end result is so beautiful. You know, um, we're all, as Christians, adopted into God's family, right? And so, having that potentially be the outcome, whether it's a reunification with their parents or it's an adoption situation for the foster parents, it's just a tiny piece of looking at, you know, what God wants for all of us is to be adopted into his family. And so families are so important. And I don't know how foster parents do it, to be honest, but just encouraging them to know that they make such an important impact, even through all of the struggles, even if the child is only with them for 72 hours,
Mhm.
that little itty bitty impact that they have on this kid's life could change the whole course of the kid's future.
Mm.
And so I would just encourage them to hold strong. I know it's hard. If they have questions and they have a guardian ad litem who's willing to talk, they can answer questions, maybe not specific questions,
Mhm.
but, you know, in a roundabout way, give them some understanding of what's coming up or what they're potentially in for. I think, I think about a case where we have a foster parent who just had a kid for just a respite, just until they could find a more permanent foster home for the child. And that kid to this day still will run to that foster parent
Mm.
and give him a giant hug. And it was just a short amount of time, but they just were able to
Mm.
show just enough love to that kid that he will forever remember them. And just, you know, that to me, just the smallest little impact that they have. I don't even think foster parents realize how much impact they have on these kids' lives and how much they can change the course of their lives, just by showing love that these kids may never have even witnessed before. So that would be my encouragement. You don't even understand how much probably impact you're going to have on these kids' lives, and it's amazing. It truly is amazing, and it takes angels on earth to be able to do it.
Wow. Well, Carrie, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for your encouragement today.
Well, thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you again for listening today. I hope this episode resonated with you. Let us know your thoughts. We really love hearing from you. And as always, if you want to learn more about TFI, catch up on past episodes, read engaging articles, or partner with us on mission with a gift of any amount, head over to theforgotteninitiative.org. And until next time, remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Remember, you have a whole community here who cares for you. And even more, Jesus is fully able to meet your every need. Lean on Him and find rest in Him today. I look so forward to being together again very soon.
Resonate.